Good evening. And welcome everyone to our forum on how do school vouchers affect our public schools and taxpayers. My name is Mary Barnes. I am the chair of the Cleveland Heights University Heights chapter of the League of Women Voters of Greater Cleveland. Before we begin, I want to clarify for you the political activity of the League of Women Voters. While the League does not support or endorse political parties or candidates running for office, we do take positions on policy issues. These positions are developed by League members in a local, statewide, or a national process that involves study of the issues and member discussions. The concerns underlying the reason for tonight's forum stem from the League of Women Voters of Ohio's positions on financing K-12 public education. And the relevant positions are: LWVO of Ohio supports a funding system for public elementary and secondary education that is accountable and responsive to the taxpayers, and that public funds should be used only for public schools. Also, LWVO of Ohio supports a guarantee by the state of a realistic level of of per pupil expenditure in all school districts, including Hello.
There you go. Working fine for you.
Just feel.
Okay, in the second position. Also, LWVO of Ohio supports a guarantee by the state of a realistic level of per pupil expenditure in all school districts, including compensatory education programs where needed. These positions underlie our concern about vouchers, which are not accountable to local taxpayers, especially, and which could be compromising the adequacy of funding for our local public schools. So we hope that tonight's forum will inform us of both the financial impact of vouchers on our public schools and also the complicated policies that dictate their execution. The audience may submit written questions for the panel to address in a Q&A to follow the presentations. We are passing out index cards for that purpose. Just raise your hand to get a card or to submit your question. We do have question screeners who will be assisting the moderator by reviewing questions for duplication, legibility, and civility. This forum is being videotaped and will be uploaded to the League of Women Voters of Greater Cleveland's YouTube channel. Now, before I turn the forum over to our moderator, I did also wanted to mention the fact that we are having a judicial forum, having a forum about judicial elections also here at the Heights Library. It's called Making Sense of Local Judicial Elections. There's flyers up here. And you know, many people skip the judicial portion of their ballots because they don't know how to vote for judges. The panelists will basically explain the structure of the Ohio judicial system and the role local judges play in our everyday lives to help people understand the importance of those elections. So, and I think it's 8. And that will be on Tuesday, May 7th at 7 o'clock, and it's also here at the Heights Main Library. So now I'm going to turn the forum over to Jayne Geneva. Jayne is a former Cleveland Heights resident and many-time chair of the Board of Education's Lay Finance Committee. She will moderate tonight's forum, and Jayne will also introduce our panelists.
We are really lucky in Susan. Yep. We are really lucky in Cleveland Heights to have a very knowledgeable citizenry and people who are willing to give a lot of their time to impart their knowledge to the rest of us. So I will first introduce the panelists, and then we'll move on from there to 2 presentations. Cheryl Johnson is our elected District 12 member of the State Board of Education. 11. I'm sorry. She's a retired school teacher. She's an avid advocate for students. She supported students by helping them to develop leadership skills and transported students to Columbus to lobby for school funding. Ms. Johnson also encouraged teachers through workshops on cultural competency and trauma-informed education. She served on the executive board of the North Shore AFL-CIO, and she's currently hosting a weekly radio show called It's About Justice. Jim Posch is the current vice president of the Hts-Univ Board of Education and has served the community in many capacities, including serving on the Lay Finance Committee and the Lay Facilities Committee of the Board of Education of the school district. He was also president of the Heights PTA Council, having had 2 daughters who graduated from Heights High. Jim served as president of the Heights Library Board. As a member of the school board, Mr. Posch has helped extend the life of the last operating levy and worked on the new high school and middle school's construction projects, especially in the funding to support those projects within the budget. He says the new high school is just amazing and you should go check it out. Scott Kaeser is our loyal trusted overseer of the dollars in the CHUH school district. He's worked for the district for 24 years. He is the treasurer, chief financial officer of the district, the CFO for the last 17 years. Scott has received the Excellence in Reporting Award from the Government Finance Office for 18 years. In 2010, he was named Ohio's Outstanding Treasurer CFO of the Year. In 2014, Crane's Cleveland Business named him CFO of the Year in the government category. Just last year, Mr. Gaynor received the 2018 Auditor of State Award with distinction for the state of Ohio for high-quality reporting and financial operations. Susie Kaeser has spent most of her career in volunteer life advocating for public schools. She has directed 2 nonprofit organizations committed to public education, both focusing on the critical role of the public in making public schools effective. Currently, Ms. Kaeser writes a column for the Heights Observer called The Common Good. She recently joined the lobby corps for the League of Women Voters of Ohio, advocating for the league to take a position on high-stakes testing. Susie is the co-convener of the Heights Coalition for Public Education, a volunteer group in its 6th year of raising awareness and understanding of state policies that are weakening public education. So now, Susie Kaeser will present a discussion of the large picture of vouchers in Ohio, followed by Jim Posch, who's going to talk about how it specifically affects our school district here, and Cheryl Johnson will be able to answer your questions about the state policy. Scott Gaynor can give you all the insights of the financing part of it. Susie.
Hi. As you can tell, I come to this issue as a public school advocate. And as you know, you want me to stand up? All right. Okay.
Take the mic.
Here,
Use the
like
mic.
this one right here and go over to here.
All right.
So you're not in front of your slide.
Well, I have those guys.
Well, you can stay, if you just use the mic, you're okay where you are.
I'll just do this. Just this. I think I can do it. Okay. So my goal here is to provide an overview of the
In front of your mouth or it doesn't do any good.
So sit down, talk into it.
My goal is to provide an overview of how the voucher programs work in the state of Ohio. And to also provide some understanding of how the funding affects every school district and our school district in particular. It's complicated stuff, and I've been sort of wrestling with it for many years, trying to explain it.
You need to go closer. to the mic.
Look into it.
Yeah, just stand there.
Is this all right now?
No,
Can I take a look at it?
please.
Oh, it's because it's on mute.
It's on mute. It's on.
Test, test.
Should I start again?
You're with the friend. They don't.
Okay. So, in any case, I want to give an overview of of the voucher programs and how they affect our school district. I do come to this with a bias, which is that I believe in public education, and I believe that we're in a situation that is, for years, has been slowly chipping away at the fundamental capacity, confidence, and perspective on our public schools. So I'm calling this vouchers privatizing public education. It's a conflict between individual choice and the common good. In all of our public policy, those issues are always in tension. And our public school system is built on commitment to the common good. So the beneficiaries of a public school system are not the individuals, any individual. It is our community who is the beneficiary of having an educated electorate. So our democracy and our community are the beneficiaries. The choice movement and privatization movement are really about asserting the importance of individual decision-making at the expense of the common good. So this is really, public education is about the common good, and privatization, particularly in the form of vouchers, is chipping away and undermining that and prioritizes the interest of the individual. I want to give a quick vocabulary lesson in the privatization vocabulary. We have charter schools and vouchers. They're both forms of schooling where public funds are used in private settings. In Ohio, a charter school is called a community school, and in Ohio, a voucher is called a scholarship, just so you know what we're talking about here. We like to soft pedal. So the state has 5 different voucher programs. Many states have no voucher programs, but we've quietly accrued inch by inch more and more options, trying to reach different populations of people. So the very first program targeted students in Cleveland Metropolitan School District. It started in 1995. It led to a lawsuit that went to the Supreme Court. The League of Women Voters was a party in that lawsuit, challenging the voucher program on the basis of the separation of church and state. And there's another thing, I don't quite get it. Second, two purposes legislation. In any case, the local federal district court found it unconstitutional, so did the appeals court, but the Supreme Court did not. So it has been found to be constitutional. Shortly after that was decided in 2002, the state enacted a new scholarship program, the Autism Scholarship Program. And this focused on a very narrow population of students statewide, where you could arguably say local school districts may not have adequate resources to provide them services, so they got in the door with autism scholarships. The John Peterson Special Needs Scholarships were added in 2011. That expands scholarships to all kinds of special ed students, so it's not limited to autistic students. The Ed Choice Scholarship Program came along in 2005. The target for this program, or this set of vouchers, is students residing in an individual school that the state accountability system has found to be low performing. This was supposed to provide students a way out of a bad school. And finally, the Ed Choice Expansion Program was passed just a couple years ago, and that is a statewide focused program for low-income children 200% below poverty to have access to a voucher. The funding level for each voucher program is a little different, and it's set by the state legislature, and you can see these numbers. 27,000, I don't have to repeat them, you can read them. But the Peterson, there's 6 different amounts depending on the child's disability diagnosis. These are the baselines, and Scott has been really good about reminding me that in many cases, we get an extra bump for language learners, for special education, for poverty. So some individual children will get a higher amount depending if any of those other labels apply to them. Is that accurate? So the target for the Ed Choice expansion is statewide, and each year they've added another grade, so this year I think it's K through 7. And what's interesting about the Ed Choice expansion vouchers is they are actually funded in a line item in the state budget with lottery dollars. And the access is by application. I want to go back to this. What these all have in common is, first, the schools, the private schools that no private school is required to participate in this program. It's totally optional. So not every school in the state agrees to accept vouchers. Then, so a family that wants to use a voucher identifies a school that participates in the voucher program, applies to that school. If they're admitted to the school, then their school accesses voucher money from the state. The other thing is that all voucher students, even though private schools, not all private schools are required to test students, if you are there on a voucher, you participate in the state's testing program. If the cost of the tuition is greater than the amount of your voucher, that's up to the parent to make up the difference. So the autism vouchers at this point is the most expensive, and it serves the smallest number of children. It's not a big program, but it is a big expense per child. With the John Peterson scholarships, each child has to have an IEP. Any special ed child by law is required to have an IEP. The local public school district where they reside is responsible for conducting that IEP at the expense of the school district. And I think we have 3.5 people full-time providing the IEP, so that's an extra expense. Again, it's 6 levels of funding. 5%, there's a cap on the number of vouchers in the state, 5% of the special ed population. I don't think they come close to doing that. And in our district, we have 212 kids this year participating. There are 16 different providers that residents of our school districts use with their John Peterson. Some of them have specialized expertise in special education, and some do not. Some of them are religious schools that also offer special ed as to the public schools. The largest enrollments are at the Hebrew Academy and at E+ Solutions. So for Ed Choice vouchers, the eligible students are people who live in the attendance zone of a public school that is labeled as Ed Choice. They don't ever have to have attended that school if they enroll with a voucher in kindergarten, or if they're moving from out of state. So while this is supposed to help students leave low-performing schools, you don't ever have to have attended one of these low-performing schools. You just have to live in the attendance area. And that Ed Choice label is triggered by the low performance on high-stakes testing. There's 60,000 vouchers available statewide, and as of 2017, about 20,000 of them had been used. So they're not in high demand everywhere, but they're in high demand here. And another interesting thing about an Ed Choice voucher is that once you receive one, if you remain in the school district for the rest of your school career, you are allowed to reapply and get another voucher every year, even if the school, that attendance area thing doesn't apply anymore. And it seems very unlikely that a school that is identified as an Ed Choice school really has the potential of ever not being one. In our school district, 27 different schools accept Ed Choice vouchers, and only one of them is not a religious school. And in many cases, the choice, what you're funding is not a new decision of a new place to go, but you're funding a decision that was already made. So we transfer more than $4 million for 880 students from our community. Currently, there are 218 Ed Choice schools in the state of Ohio, and they are found in 39 districts. Cuyahoga County is hit very hard by Ed Choice. 7 of the 30 suburbs are Ed Choice suburbs. But next year, this is going to jump exponentially to 475 schools in 138 districts. And there will be 3 more in Cuyahoga County. These are the current Ed Choice school districts. That means they have at least one school in their district that is an Ed Choice school. And you can see it's essentially high poverty school districts that are most affected. Next year, there will be 3 more from Cuyahoga County. And it's really, the criteria have changed. There are several different reasons the schools can be put into Ed Choice, which is explaining this. And for 3 or 4 years, there was a safe harbor provision while the tests that were being used, the high stakes tests, kept changing, so they didn't feel it was fair to assign new districts or schools. But when the safe harbor period ended, they didn't continue and do a 3 years from the beginning of a new test. They just jumped back over 3 years back in order to get, because you have to have 3 years of data to define whether or not you put in this. So it's a really questionable and troubling to anyway, that's how it's done. So this helps you show, this shows you the voucher use by program in this school district for the last 4 years. And that's the total. The autism, you see it's been a very stable number, not huge change over time. The Peterson special ed numbers have increased 3-fold over this time. And you've noticed that the Ed Choice vouchers have increased 8-fold. So we've gone from 175 vouchers 4 years ago to 1,124 now. This is a very steep growth, and it's primarily in Ed Choice. While Peterson is the most, and autism is the most expensive. These are the biggest numbers. Both are expensive in their own ways. So, funding for vouchers comes out of the funding of a local school district where the child resides. See if I can get this right. So we are allocated, and every school district, because of the formula, gets a different amount of money. They get a different amount of money per student. But for us, this has been our state aid for the last 4 years, between 18-21 million. And the second column shows you the amount of money that's been, it's called a transfer. It's subtracted from your state allocation. It doesn't come into the district and out, but it's taken out of our pot of money at the state that is earmarked for the Cleveland Heights University Heights schools. And every month, a payment is made to each school for the number of children in that school who are there with a voucher. So, so it's a transfer and a subtraction. So 4 years ago, 7% of our state aid went to voucher programs, and now 34% of our state aid goes to vouchers. Another way to look at this is to try to figure out how much each student is spending and compared to the children in the public schools. So if you add the state funding, you have to add up all the kids who reside in your school district who either use a voucher, attend a charter school, or use the public schools. So that's the column on the far right. So we have 6,637 kids that get mixed into our ABM count. They divide up the $21 million, and that's how much you can figure we get per pupil. You can do that for each group of kids, the public school, Ed Choice, special ed, and charter students. And this is what you get. So all students in our district, on average, get $3,200. If every child got the same amount of money, then there would be no drain on the regular, on the funds that are available to the children in public schools. But the money goes out first to the voucher program. So the Ed Choice students use $4,755 a piece. Special is up to $12,000. Charter schools are around $7,000. So public school students get about $1,000 less than what they bring in, what they generate for the district. And all the other groups get quite a bit more than what they generate for the school district. Does that make sense? So another way to look at it is public school kids are 78% of the population of our ADM, but they get 54% of the state funds that are for our school district. And remember, if we didn't have vouchers, 100% of the state funding would go to public school students. So now it's 54%. The Ed Choice vouchers, 13% of the students take 19% of the funds. Special ed is obviously a bigger lump per percentage. So when you subtract all that out, at least this year, it looks like about $5.1 million of our state aid is being lost from public school students to go to fund the other students. So this is a problem on several levels. So for me, when you lose that amount of state aid, it weakens the school district and the community it serves. You have the choice, when you lose $5.1 million, anybody who's worked on a levy in this district knows how important $5.1 million is. That's a lot of money, and you fight hard to get it. So you have two choices. You can cut programs in the public schools and punish the students who are in the schools, or you can raise property taxes, which is how you punish the community. It's hard on any community to have a high tax rate, which we have. We need to remember the DeRolf decision really found our system of school funding to be unconstitutional, largely because of the over-reliance on local property taxes. So the state has set up a system that requires, if a school district wants to maintain a quality of programs, it has to raise property taxes. So it's shifting the burden and not solving the school funding problem. Another major problem with this approach from my perspective and the league's perspective is it violates core principles about the use of public funds. Our elected Board of Education provides the oversight for our public funds to guarantee that they're spent for public purposes. When money follows kids out the door to a private school, there is no oversight that goes with that money. And that's a serious violation of governance. And while the Supreme Court did not find this to be a violation of a separation of church and state, we're funding religious education, whether it fits in their definition or not. And that is also a problematic part of this program. And finally, I think that by pegging the vouchers to Ed Choice, which is defined by testing, and we know testing discriminates against children in poverty or high poverty school districts, you are in fact taking funds away from the most needy children. So if this is supposed to be improving education in Ohio, I think it falls short on that. So that's mine.
Oh, don't touch it. I have some handouts, so.
So my name is Jim Posch. I am a Cleveland University High School Board member. I'd like to introduce Malia Lewis, who is also a member of our Board of Education. And I want to jump right into this, but we do have an announcement to make. So, many of you know that our board has been wrestling with the decision to hire a superintendent. We made the decision earlier tonight.
Oh, good.
We chose Elizabeth Kirby. Elizabeth comes from Chicago. Much bigger job than what she's decided to take on here, but wants to move back to Cleveland. Elizabeth was the candidate that Jayne was also considering. And she wants to come to Cleveland Heights. So, sorry about that. So, I mean, the core reason why I'm here is my kids got a phenomenal education in this school district. I mean, absolutely phenomenal. I went to a private school, I went to Hawken. I thought for sure my kids would go there. But my wife is a Heights high grad. We started in the Heights, and for sure every year I thought they'd go to Hawken, but I gotta tell you, it got better and better and better as the years went by. So now I like to advocate for these things. I really believe in our education and what we're doing. There's lots of pieces of data that supports we're doing. I mean, we're doing a good job, but we got a lot better job we could do. We're in a district that has been defined as a declining enrollment district, but our enrollment is up 2% this year. So just saying that there's a lot of good things that are going on in this district. So this is the deal. There's really three things I'm going to talk about this evening. One of them is the punitive state testing, and then it's how the voucher programs affect our funding and sustainability. And these are real life examples. So if you remember Susie's presentation, there's really a couple things I want you to just sort of keep in the back of your head. First of all, Ed Choice is triggered by low performance. Okay, so Ohio Revised Code is triggered by low performance. And also what you can keep in mind, next year's Ed Choice is expanding from 233 schools to 475.
That's statewide.
Statewide, right. Just think about that. So we're talking about the punitive nature of the testing. So, and the test scores. So these are two facts. 83% of the school districts in Ohio have an F on the report card, and 5% have only received A as their overall score. Now there's a difference between, there's lots of settings in the report card, so not everybody's getting Fs, not 83% Fs, but 83% of the school districts have an F on the report card. So,
Jim, could you tell everybody how many components there are to the report card?
we will in a minute.
Thank you.
So, if we're talking about testing, what I did was I handed out one of the questions. And you can take it home, you could read it, but if you just take a minute and read the question, okay? It's just a question that's being asked on the state report card, okay? I'm going to jump ahead in the interest of time, but really focus on the question and try to figure out if you really know what they're asking, okay? And then figure out, do they really want to know exactly how many posters, down to the $100, or can you go just under that? But the deal is, these are the answers, and this is a 4th grade test question. So I think if you go through the question, and, take it home, try to answer it, see how long it takes you to answer that question. And just remember, there's a 4th grader sort of right behind you trying to answer that question too, okay? So one of the things, and I don't have a slide for this, but as we were interviewing superintendent candidates, one of our local candidates reminded us of one of the questions, and it's a math question that's given in the elementary schools, and it says question regarding slope, how do you calculate this slope? But in the question itself, it never used the word slope, it used you're on a black diamond doing X, answer this question. So, okay, so I'm a big skier, okay? So, but even when they tell me a black diamond, I'm thinking to myself, oh, they're talking about a ski slope, and how many of these kids ski? And how many black diamonds do we actually even have in Ohio? And so, I mean, this is the problem with the tests. I mean, so when you're labeled as a low-performing school because you don't understand what the word black diamond means, or how you can't unpack that kind of question. So as Molly was saying, I mean, there's lots of components in the test scores. I mean, we as a school district I'm not proud of any of these test scores that we get, but we're labeled as a D. And it's basically rated by these 6 components. And some districts don't have, for example, a gap closing. If you don't have a lot of diversity in your school district, you don't have the gap closing things. So you get sort of a free ride on that. But districts like ours, we've got lots of diversity and lots of segmentation in how they break out the test scores. I mean, we've got some extra measures we have to meet. So remember, an A isn't an A in Cleveland or an A in Solon. I mean, they're not necessarily apples and oranges. But I'm going to focus on just one of these measures, just so you sort of can see how it plays out. And it's relatively straightforward, but not clearly straightforward. But I'm going to focus on our graduation rate. And we have a C on the report card for our graduation rate. And you can see it's broken down into a 5-year and a 4-year rate. We have a lot of kids that come in from other school districts in the 9th grade because they want the Heights High experience. And I got to tell you, sometimes it takes those kids 5 years to get through. So, and this is sort of normal with all school districts. So they look at it a 4- and a 5-year rate. And you know, for a long time, they really weren't factoring the 5-year rate. I mean, now it's a 60-40 split. But you can see by the end of the 5th year, if you're counting that, we're at 91%. So where we compare, we just focus on the left. Unfortunately, you can't read this. The more green you get, the A's, the red you get are F. So A, B, C, D, F. So we're sort of in that 10% when it comes to the state rating. When you look at us in the first-ring suburbs, we sort of compare ourselves to all the first-ring school districts. We're sort of in that also the yellow column, at 31%. But our graduation rate is above the state average. Seriously, we are above the state average. We still get a C, but we are above the state average. And this sort of tracks it. You got to wonder, well, why are we a C when we're all above the state average? I mean, does that mean you're average? Well, if you go back and sort of look at this component here, something's going on with how they're factoring in the C and how they're coming up with that C. And we have a lot of subgroups within our school district. So even though our graduation rate is above the state average, we get knocked down because we have a more diverse school district. That's really what it comes down to. But that's a C rating, okay? So, we talked about Ed Choice. How does this factor into Ed Choice? So, our brand new, beautiful high school was just named an Ed Choice school last year. Well, it was named this year for next year. So we're one of these schools that was named an Ed Choice school. And the reason why is solely because of our graduation rate. We're above the state average, by the way, in our graduation rate, but we are now pegged as a low-performing school. So let's look at this a little bit. So Susie sort of alluded to the safe harbor thing. So in the year 2018 to 19, we were named the Ed Choice School. So next year, if you go to the high school, you can use a voucher to go to another school of your choice, again, because our school is a low-performing school. But it's based on 2012, 2013, and 2014 because the state has the safe harbor provision and they're not counting 15, 16, and 17. The test scores weren't working out the way the state really thought they'd work out. So you sort of get a free pass on those years. But they have to go back 3 years because we'll have a revised code. So they're labeling us even more. I mean, we're a failing, not a failing school, but we are a low-performing school for kids that are now 25 and 26 years old. Remember, there's 6 components on the state report card. I can spend some time and I could unpack those 5 other measures and show you how, when they refer to a low-performing school, is it really a low-performing school? I don't think so. And again, remember, we're still above the state average. So kind of think about what this does to the community. So we made a $100 million investment in our high school. I don't think even if you didn't vote for the levy, you don't go to public school, this is a $100 million asset in our community. Okay? You may not like it went, but I mean, would you want the state to turn around and call your school a low-performing school when it's not? What about the kids that go to that building? Do they want to be targeted in a low-performing building. We have schools that are marked failing schools, okay? If you're a kid, do you want to go to a school that's labeled failing when it's really not a failing school? What about the economics of the families that leave our community for other communities because of this miscommunication? And that's your house, it's your property values. You know, I think this just demonizes the schools and the community, okay? So my point is not to really make a political statement about the vouchers. I just take extreme issue when they say our schools is a low-performing school. Yeah, we have a lot of work to do to improve the performance in our schools. I mean, we have high expectations. We're trying to make it a great place to work for our teachers. We're trying to make it a great environment for our students. Many of our families have great experiences with it, but kind of take exception to that, and hopefully other people do too. So let's look at the funding sustainability when this happens. So Susie was looking at some numbers that included the charter schools. My analysis of this doesn't. But just think about the last school levy that we had. Okay, so the $7.3 million that we pay for the schools that are going to the Ed Choice, the non-publics, exceeds the amount of money that we raised in our last school levy. So, we're fiscally challenged, okay? But kind of keep in mind, we work really, really hard to be as sustainable as we possibly can. But this is sort of an indication of that. When you see that kind of money, I mean, do we really have to go have another school levy if the money isn't going out the door? So I'm just sort of recapping a couple of the slides from Susie, just so you have a little bit better understanding of where the money goes. If you can just really focus on the numbers to the far right, just the vouchers. So according to our budget, in 2015, we went from 1.4 million to 2018, 7.3 million. So I'm just trying to make a point that these are real numbers. This is the sustainability issues. These numbers are growing, okay? This just shows you where the money, these are the top 10 schools that are using our vouchers. Not trying to make any kind of statement. Nobody's breaking the laws. This is all real. I mean, the fact is 95% of our schools who use the vouchers do go to religious schools. And they were probably unlikely to use our schools to begin with, okay? But I understand it. I mean, again, no laws are being broken. There's a couple things I want people to understand. There's a lot of folks that really, really like these vouchers, and their part of their messaging is local districts are not hurt when a voucher is used because they sort of say that you get some state money. Well, you do get some state money. So this is how it works. So if you look at a high school voucher, which is worth $6,000, the state share of that is $2,167. The local share that comes out of our property taxes is $3,883. So 64% of your local property taxes are going into each voucher. And that is a fixed pool of funds. So the more people that use the vouchers, the less property taxes that we're able to use. We only got $21 million from the state last year. Our budget is $110 million, okay? $21 million from the state, okay? They say that you can educate a kid sufficiently with that budget, and anything on top of that is extra money for things that you really don't need. Well, just saying, this is the reality. So if you just look at the vouchers and the percent of state funds, currently the $7.3 million that is going out the doors to fund the voucher programs, 34%, it's 34% of our state aid. So if you sort of plot this out over 10 years, starting in year 2015, and if you look at the orange line, which is our share, so it's the big part of the pie as opposed to the pie. So you just take out the money that we're getting from the state and just looking at the property tax impact. By 2025, we'll be losing $13.5 million. So if it just sort of continues on the track that it's continuing. I mean, that is, it's it's gutting our public schools. And that's, I mean, that's really the intent. So, I mean, let's just sort of look at this. So we know our funding is broke. It's been ruled unconstitutional multiple times. So with less funding, who really suffers? It really kind of comes down to our community and generally our population of poor families. If you're already a family that was going to use a religious school and you want some relief of your tuition and you want to get some of your property tax back, it's legal, you can do that using a voucher. But the people that ultimately suffer is not the kid that's going to go to the religious school who's going to go there anyways. It's a typical Cleveland Heights school kid. So is choice better? I mean, okay, I'm a little editorializing here, and this is a whole nother thing, but I mean, are choice schools better? Academically, no, and fiscally, no. They're just, I mean, there's proof, where if you go to a choice school, you're not going to get a better academic, and it's not going to be cheaper. And really, who benefits from these? It's parochial advocates. If you just sort of look at the 95% of the money is going to religious schools and the operators of these schools. And it's at the expense of our community and our taxpayers. So, that's all I have for you guys.
Okay, if you have questions to be written on cards, please get them written and pass them in. Our first question for the panel is?
I don't get to talk.
Oh, okay.
Let me talk.
Yeah, go ahead.
Scott?
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. I need you to know, I'm not an expert on this. I'm on the State Board of Education. The folks who put this together are the Ohio Department of Education. So when you write your questions down, please don't think that I'm going to be this expert who's going to be able to answer everything. What I want to be able to share with you is the State Board of Education has 19 members. 11 are elected, 8 are appointed by the governor. And so I am your representative, covering 2/3 of Cuyahoga County and 1/3 of Lake County. I taught in Cleveland schools for 40 years. I advocated against school vouchers during my entire time in the leadership of the Cleveland Teachers Union. And so I need you to know that I too have a bias. You just need to know that. And so I wanted to, first of all, read something to you that this is like really old. I keep this folder of voucher materials that from way back, and I just grab it when I need it. But this, I think, is really powerful. It's from Keeping the Promise. It's the debate over charter schools, but you can put voucher schools in that sentence. It says, the elixir of choice serves the privatizer's interest. It sets up an individualized escape route that not only divides communities, but also weakens the political will for collective action in support of public schools. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. The more highly motivated and engaged families pull out, taking public dollars with them, the worse the public schools get. The worse they get, the more appealing the escape route. This fundamental logic is at the core of the conservative agenda to convert public education to a private free market system. Rethinking Schools is edited by Lee Dickerson, Barbara Miner, Bob Peterson, and Stephanie Walters, and that's from 2008. And for those of you who know Bob Peterson, I just found out that he's running for the school board in Milwaukee, so that's very exciting. So I wanted to share that with you to let you know where I'm coming from. And the folks on the state board, they know where I stand. But since vouchers are here and charter schools are here, and I call them charter schools at the state board meeting, I never call them community schools. I refuse. Okay, community schools are in Cincinnati, which take wraparound services and make sure that families and students are able to what they read. That's a community school. So I call them charter schools. But since they're here, the committee that I sit on looks at the regulations from the Ohio Revised Code and sees what needs to happen. And so what I feel my job is to make sure that whatever is being provided equitably. So I will question, how are you making sure that all families find out this information? So that's basically the role that I am playing. But I want to read something to you. I wanted to say, what can I bring to the people that you may not be aware of? And so I want to read something to you, and it's a little teensy-weensy quiz. It's a letter to Most Reverend Anthony M. Pillow, Bishop of the Cleveland Diocese. Dear Bishop Pillow, recently I met with several businessmen in Naples, Florida, who are supporting my campaign for the United States Senate. The event was held at Dave Brennan's home, and many of our mutual friends were there, including the Wasmers. One of the things I pointed out to them was the role that our non-public schools are playing in contributing to the diversity and quality of education in this country. It is interesting that, like Dave Brennan, many of them are very committed to the scholarship school choice crusade. Too many of them are not that familiar with our parochial school system and what they could be doing to support that system. The thought came to me that as president of the U.S. Catholic Conference of Bishops, you could gather together the bishops from the various states and perhaps some outstanding Catholic layman leaders to talk about seeing how they can increase the support of our non-public schools throughout the country. The point I am making is our non-public schools are doing a great job, and I suspect a lot of them are doing what you are trying to do in Cleveland and other urban areas. You are providing an opportunity for a lot of kids who wouldn't ordinarily have a chance to have a good education, and we should really see if we can't stimulate more state support for a non-public school system. That doesn't mean that we should back away from programs like the Scholarship and Escrow program in Cleveland, but you and I know it is going to be a long time before we can sell America on that initiative. The point I'm making is that we can do a lot more for non-public schools in the United States of America, and I would like to help you get it done. I would be willing to pitch in and do my part. Who wrote that?
George Winovich.
Say it louder.
George Winovich.
Exactly.
If I had some candy, I'd give it to you, Jayne. That was the quiz. That was written by Governor George Voinovich, and I left out the sentence where he said, I'm going to be president of the National Governors Association, because that might have given you a hint. But this letter was written on April 21st, 1997. The Cleveland voucher program started in 95. So I wanted you, I believe in history, and I think that as we discuss these things, we need to know why it's here and how it got here. I think that, and I appreciate the information that was shared before I'm speaking, and so I don't have a whole lot more to add to that. I did get some information on, applying and that kind of thing, if anybody wants to know that. It's on the Ohio Department of Education's website. They have a very thorough website on anything you want to know about, and so I suggest that you check it out if there's information that you need. But the Cleveland Teachers Union advocated against vouchers a long time ago, and Jan Ressinger was right there at the forefront with us. And so this is a Cleveland Teachers Union critique newspaper that Michael Charney, and who was the husband of Senator C.J. Prentice, and Pamela Hummer, put out critiques. They were fabulous. They won all kinds of awards. This is from a special voucher issue from January 2002. And you see the headline, 99%. You read it right. That's how many voucher students now attend parochial schools. So the case did go all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. And as Director of Community Engagement, I took a bus to D.C. and we took some parents. And here we are, the parents and the group standing in front of the U.S. Supreme Court from the wonderful Stakeholders magazine that used to come out. And so we had a wonderful rally in downtown Public Square in the snow against vouchers, and Congressman Lou Stokes was one of our speakers, and Christine Link from the ACLU was one of our speakers, and so we just fought and fought and fought. The other thing that I want to share with you is that we started with vouchers. Anybody know how vouchers became charter schools in Cleveland? Yes, I read this, Jan, I saw that. Jan said David Brennan, and that was correct. Let me just read this. If you want to get more information, the Akron Beacon Journal did a fabulous piece called Whose Choice? Our Choice or something, but it's from the Akron Beacon Journal from December 12, 1999. And I just want to read one little paragraph to you, a little bit more history, so we kind of put this in context. It says, in the 1990 campaign for governor, David Brennan contributed $89,000 to George Voinovich. Over the years, he continued to be a close ally, contributing at least $120,000 alone to Voinovich and nearly $1 million to the Ohio Republicans. I am being nonpartisan, I'm just reading facts, okay? Brennan struck a deal with Voinovich to chair a school choice commission that would plan a sharp increase in state aid to private schools with the use of vouchers. Despite resistance in the legislature, Voinovich forced the voucher issue and then allowed Brennan to have an active role in running the program. When Brennan was unable to make money in the voucher program, Voinovich played an important role in opening Ohio to one of the most aggressive charter school programs that guaranteed enough state tax dollars that anyone who was determined could make profits operating schools. You need to know that, okay? So that's basically all I wanted to share with you, but I just think, you know, we kind of exist in a vacuum when we don't know the history and why we are in the situation that we are in. So that's basically all the remarks that I had for you, but I wanted to give you that history.
Okay, our first question is,
Scott's not gonna talk. He just gives numbers.
Scott said he would be glad to back up with any numbers you would like to know. Some of these questions may in fact have to be answered by him. And maybe this one. What is the net effect of the voucher system for a student who would not have the opportunity for a better education? What? What is the net effect of the voucher system for a student who would not have the opportunity for a better education?
For a public school student.
Public school student too.
I mean, if the question is somewhat implying that the best education is not in the public schools, I mean, I think there's an argument to be made that the way that that's measured is not accurate. So.
Okay. Next question. Do the families that get vouchers have to show an income need?
No, except the Ed Choice expansion.
Talk right into the mic, people, we can't hear you.
Ed Choice.
No, that's
Ed Choice expansion. Can you hear me?
No.
It's probably on here.
Ed Choice expansion vouchers are income-based, but the others are not.
And let me just respond from the ODE website, just to give you the information, who's eligible. The following students are eligible to apply for an Ed Choice scholarship. Students currently attending their assigned public school in their resident district that is on the list of designated public schools are eligible to apply. Public school students attending a school in their resident district who will be assigned to one of the designated public schools for the upcoming school year are also eligible to apply. And by designated, that means schools that are considered failing. Students currently attending a charter or community school whose assigned home school is an eligible school on our list are also eligible to apply. Students eligible to enter kindergarten for the upcoming school year who would be assigned to one of the designated public schools are also eligible to apply. And so I wanted to just share that with you. Students who do not meet any of the preceding eligibility criteria may still be eligible for the Ed Choice Expansion Scholarship if they meet the following criteria. Student is eligible to enter kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, or 6th grade for the fall 2019. Student does not live in the Cleveland Municipal School District, and here's the income issue, family household income is at or below 200% of the federal poverty guidelines. So as was answered, if for the expansion, it is based on income. But I wanted to share that information. Go ahead.
So,
I've just read the legislation, and new legislation has been introduced to replace the voucher system, and eligibility for those vouchers would be 400% of poverty level, meaning they'd be pretty much available to everybody.
Is that Huffmansville?
no, it's Kohler.
Okay.
It just came in,
Okay.
so,
It's not passed.
no, it's just been introduced.
Yeah, that was similar to Huffmansville.
Okay. Are the legislative funding voucher levels adjusted for inflation? And is state aid adjusted for inflation?
So the voucher amounts do increase annually. I do know that. The state amounts that we receive are not necessarily adjusted for inflation. And in fact, we as a district are capped right now. So depending on the number of students we get, our state funding is flat right now. So one of the things that is I think needs to be said is that we receive 36%. So the state would say, and it's a very complex and complicated formula. And I think that what the state does is decides how much money they have to give, and then they kind of back into this formula in terms of how they're going to distribute the money. But what happens is they've assumed that it's $6,020 per student is what any district should get. But then they go through this complicated calculation to say, however, you are a high wealth district, so you shouldn't receive the full $6,000. So Cleveland Heights University Heights Schools is considered a high wealth district because although we have a large number of students in poverty, we are property dense. We have over $1 billion in assessed value. And so that, among other factors, reduces that $6,000. So really, we only get 36% of the $6,000. So we get, that would be $2,167 is what we receive. However, when the vouchers go out the door, so for example, the Ed Choice voucher, a full $4,650 leaves.
Oh.
So we only get $2,167 because the state assumes that we can generate dollars locally. However, the full 46 goes out the door. So, oftentimes I'll be asked the question, and that's why I appreciate these forums and the opportunity to get the information out there and the facts out there. People will assume that there's no harm to the district because, okay, well now you count the student, you get the money, and then the money leaves you. Well, yes, you're now counting a student, you're receiving 36% of the money, we're receiving $2,000, but more than that is leaving the district, and that's where we really run into issues and kind of the message that we want to make sure everyone understands.
Okay. For Meryl, how many school board members, elected or appointed, support vouchers?
I have no idea. It never, the subject never comes up at school board meetings. I was elected in November of 2016, and for those 2 years, from then until now, until January, we really had a good, solid, child-centered school board. Even though we only had 2 educators, Pat Runs and myself, only 2 K-12 educators, and we had a couple of higher ed educators, but the rest were business people and community members. We really did some good work. We put together an excellent strategic plan, which is on the Ohio Department of Education website, and I'm hoping that you will take a look at it. It's called Each Child, Our Future. We did some very good work. Now, as of January, Pat Runs lost her election. And it broke my heart and it broke her heart because she and I were the 2 who challenged ODE on educational issues. Nobody else did that because they didn't have the experience. So Governor Kaeser appointed 4 more business people to the board. We had 3 more elected. One of them is a higher ed educator and the other 2 are not. So I can tell you which ones, how many Democrats there are, you know, but this is nonpartisan, so I'm not going to do that. But when we talk about how many support vouchers, it really hasn't come up in our discussion, so I wouldn't be able to answer that.
Okay.
Can I add something real quick? Yes. I mean, this is, okay, so you would think the state school board would have this purview. It's legislative, so this is not how revised code. So these decisions that are being made, the safe harbor, it's not our school board members that you can point your finger at, it's the legislators. Those are the people that are making the decisions. So, thank you.
Okay, CHUH teachers ranked number 5 out of 608 districts in Ohio in terms of salary per the Plain Dealer. If Ed Choice kids came back to the CHUH schools, how much would actually be saved as additional hiring would be required? I think we can take a ballpark figure.
All right. That's a complicated question. I would say that, you know, it kind of depends. Oftentimes I'll get the question, well, what if we, you know, lost 50 students tomorrow? Would that impact the number of teachers that we need? And that's not necessarily the case, because those 50 students would be spread across buildings, across grade levels. So if you lose a couple of students here and a couple of students there, that's not necessarily going to mean that you have fewer teachers. And it's not going to necessarily mean you're going to have a smaller physical plant. You're still going to need the same number of buildings. You're probably going to need the same number of buses. So if we have all of these students return to us, again, we are capped. So we would be at the total amount of money. We wouldn't lose all that money that you saw on the slides. But we would have to, you know, certainly have some additional teachers. It all depends on the class sizes, and a lot of times these students are special needs students, so it would depend on what services were required and whether or not they required aids and those kinds of services too. So it's really a complicated question to say if we had an influx of these students, what would it look like? But you know, there certainly would be some additional teachers that would be required, additional staff required, but you know, that right.
What would happen if the state share proportion that goes to vouchers exceeds the state share allocated to the district?
And you know, that is a question that I do not have an answer to, but was asked of me tonight. So, and I don't know that I am aware of a district that's the situation. You know, there are districts like Euclid and some of our neighboring districts that have a significant portion of their state monies going to vouchers, but what would happen if the amount going for vouchers exceeded the amount we're getting from the state? I don't know that. I know that, you know, they may, I don't know whether they would take that excess and hold it and you know, at some point true it up, or whether they would actually try to dip into the local property tax base and try to take that money out of it. I don't know of a situation where that exists currently, so I don't have an answer for that question, but it's a good question.
But
But it's heading in that direction.
It is heading in that direction, sir.
Okay, this is another one for you, Meryl. Is there something the state school board can do to better support public school funding?
The state school board does not have any impact on funding, but I think what we have done is, as I've already mentioned, our strategic plan includes many areas that will make public schools effective, such as good teachers and student supports and so forth. So we don't affect funding at all, but we're working to make sure that public education is what it should be.
If a child uses a voucher, that's one less student in public school. Why does this hurt public school? There are less expenses, smaller class size, fewer students means you need less money.
Well, I think that kind of goes back to the point that I was trying to make earlier, which is if you have 50 fewer students, that doesn't necessarily mean any less cost to the district. We still have the same number of teachers we have to pay at the same buildings, you'd have to stay the same transportation, utilities costs, all of those things would remain the same. We would just be losing money. We have less money to pay for those things. So, often I do again get that question. Well, we have one less student. Is that should be more efficient for you? And it's not. It takes a large number, and it's difficult for a district to react if you have large losses of students in a quick manner. You don't necessarily, you're not able to rearrange it. It would require redistricting and building closures and all those kinds of things, and that's really a difficult proposition. So.
So, I mean, if you just look at the data, 95% of those kids that are using a voucher are kids that are not existing Heights kids. They're kids that are using a voucher legally because they're already going to another school. So it's not we're taking kids out of our school to use a voucher. These are new kids that are either at another school or going to another school and using the voucher. Again, because our schools are low performing, which we can substantiate and show you they're not. I'll give you one example tonight.
So the state of Ohio is charged with, the legislature is charged with providing for a thorough and efficient system of public schools. And by diverting public funds to provide a parallel system of schools with those funds, you're completely destroying the efficiency side of it. I would say the state board, I think, has a role in that if we could come up with a state funding formula that's really based on high quality of education, I think you're very good at articulating what that would include. That's your, I know that. Anyway, so the efficiency issue here is for real. I mean, just to administer all those vouchers, they have to deal with many hundreds more units of education just to pass out the money. But there's also the way in which, a system of public schools, there's an efficiency level that's reached when you have a certain mass of participants. And our per pupil costs go down as the number of students go up. Because the fixed costs are shared across more students. So more students can actually be a savings rather than a cost to you. And I think we forget that losing a child isn't the same as losing a whole, sorry.
There's something else that hasn't been mentioned, which is a consequence of unfunded schools, underfunded schools, and that is the state takeovers. And so I need to put that on the table because it's something that is destroying our school districts. I don't know how many of you are familiar with House Bill 70, which was originally supposed to be a law that dealt with requiring all districts to have wraparound services so that we would help especially our low-income students. but the legislature took House Bill 70, and it was a 10-page bill, and they added a 67-page amendment. And it was done in one day with no hearings at all. And you know, you're supposed to have at least 3 hearings, a sponsor hearing, opponent hearing, and proponent hearing. And it was done in one day behind closed doors, and it became House Bill 70, in which the state school board, the elected school board of the district has their power snatched away from them. And a academic distress commission is put in place. And three members are appointed by the state superintendent, 1 member is appointed by the mayor, and 1 member has to be a teacher appointed by the president of their school board. The only power left with the school board is they can put a levy on the ballot. And the CEO has all power. It's everything, hiring, firing, putting together a plan, whatever. Unions, only thing that stays with the union is the wages and benefits. Everything else, the contract can be decimated. And so what is happening is it was placed in Youngstown and Lorraine, and there has not been any improvement, and it is tearing communities apart. And it's really heartbreaking to see what this House Bill 70 is doing. And I spoke to State Superintendent Paulo Di Maria. He's finally coming around and realizing that was a bad idea. I hope you read the article, Cleveland.com, where they quoted him as saying that it is tearing communities apart and has a number of challenges. But I'm mentioning that because that's another one of the consequences of pulling funding away from school districts. And then, as in the quote that I read, chasing people away from the district, and then the district doesn't have the funds it needs, and so more people leave. And so fortunately, in the legislature, under a new governor, there's some bills that are being proposed that will either put a moratorium on House Bill 70 or will weaken it a little bit. But there's a long list of districts, Columbus, Dayton, a number of districts are on the list to go into state takeover. It's very scary. It's very, very scary.
So there's actually been legislation introduced to
Ken Smith introduced legislation saying there will be no more distress commissions.
Right.
And Janine Boyd was.
And Ken Smith will be on my radio show Saturday,
Good.
talking about his bill that he has introduced to get rid of the academic distress commissions, 1 o'clock, 91.1 FM on Saturday.
Okay, I think this would be a good question to end with. Are any school districts banding together to lobby against vouchers? What political action can be taken to combat vouchers? Is there any national movement or organization to support this kind of thing?
Yes, sir.
Well, we can't use, okay, so really the way that this legislation happens is you have special interests lobbying, paying money to legislatures in campaign contributions. I don't have the exact number, it was like 68 million total from the charter voucher industry. I mean, it's big business to privatize education, so that's really what's going on here. And so, no, I mean, school districts are very uncomfortable spending public dollars and public time lobbying. But I think there's a time where that's going to have to change and band together. I can't get into some of the things that our board has spoken about, but it's clearly something that's on the horizon. We have to fight this. Do I, that teachers getting paid the top 5%, can I weigh in on that? So a couple questions back where the question writer, I think, is insinuating that we're paying our teachers too much. And if we didn't pay our teachers too much, the whole voucher problem, the whole voucher thing wouldn't be a big deal. you know, this is what we're up against from, if you just sort of look at a financial model. You have a public education model, and you have a private model. And the way the private model works is they pay their teachers minimum wage, and then they have two layers of profit. They have the operator and the sponsor. So the monies that you'd be normally paying, you know, a living wage to a teacher is transferred toward really the ownership function. It's really the sponsors and the operators that make all the money. So you're left with teachers that are making literally minimum wage, and they are not staying long. And they have like no retirement, really very little benefits, if any. So what's gonna end up happening now is, you know, I know our teachers, and yes, you know, they I don't wanna say that they're well paid, but they're paid fairly.
They deserve every cent.
I'd rather pay our teachers more money. So then you have the teachers that are sort of the private scenario, 20, 30 years down the road. I'm not gonna say they're gonna be wards in society because who knows what's gonna happen, but I mean, someone's gonna have to be picking up their retirement, someone's gonna have to be picking up their health care through public funding, and the way we pay our teachers currently is not. We also have to remember that these contracts are negotiated, and they were negotiated back in the 60s and 70s, okay? So when you look at a salary scale, we as a board can't arbitrarily say, well, sorry, you're getting paid too much. You know, we're gonna cut this 5% or 10%. You know, we have seen teachers all across the country, I mean, they feel like they're under attack. They are striking everywhere. You know, what would that do to our community? It's just sort of buying into this whole thing that we are going to break public education. Now, we have to be very careful when we negotiate these contracts. I mean, we can't pay anything more than what we got. We have to live within our means, and we do our very best to do that. And I sort of laid out a model earlier where, you know, if the money wasn't going out the door to vouchers, it would be sustainable. If you look at what our last levy raise was, it was 6.some million, 6.1, and 7.3 is going out the door.
So a political answer, first, the League of Women Voters lobbies on issues, and we will be lobbying on vouchers. There's a new voucher bill, and we'll be fighting that. The High School Coalition for Public Education has been doing a lot of local educating and raising awareness. We have a position on these issues, and your voices are primarily the way to go.
And just to add to that, there's a national organization called Journey for Justice. It's led by G2 Brown, J-I-T-U, and they're doing some fabulous work. G2 was one of the people that fasted for 35 days in Chicago in order to keep a high school from closing, and they were successful and were able to have that high school turn into an art school. So they do work around state takeover, vouchers, charters, everything, and they have really good research. I just wanted to give you the names of the districts that are on the list for state takeover: Ashtabula, Canton, Columbus, Dayton, Euclid, Lima, Mansfield, North College Hill, Painesville, and Toledo.
Yeah, just remember, this is because they're low-performing schools that we saw.
Based on
they
testing. Okay, based on testing, keep that in mind.
Okay, we thank you all for coming.